Well, welcome to our Impact from Home number 29. My name is Wendy Garces, and I'm part of the team at Net Impact Amsterdam. Net Impact is a global organization with more than 10,000 members and chapters across 40 countries. Amsterdam is the official European hub of Net Impact. Our mission is to build an empowered community of local professionals who contribute to a more sustainable society through their careers. We want to drive positive impact on people and the planet. To become a member of Net Impact Amsterdam, you can visit our website and fill the application form. Today's topic is the ESG career boom. Is it a good time to be an ESG professional? Probably it's a very, very good time. We will look at it. Well, I'm delighted to introduce our guest for today's session. Her name is Lottie Hopkins, ESG search consultant at Furrow Associates. She will share insights into the ESG career boom through her experience as a dedicated and passionate ESG and sustainable finance headhunter. For over 3 years, she has built expertise within this space. Now she is specializing in supporting private markets and consulting firms. She is also contributing worldwide and supporting different initiatives to aid charities in diversity and inclusion at Furrow Associates. She is joining us from, I suppose, sunny Barcelona. So please welcome with a virtual applause, Lottie. Hi, Lottie. How are you today?
Hello. Very good, thank you. Nice to meet everyone. Yeah, really delighted to be speaking today and hopefully giving some people some tips and insights into this really quite crazy career boom. It is definitely as hot as people say. So I guess a little bit of intro into, I guess, myself and how I got into the ESG sort of search really briefly. So at my previous search firm, I was actually brought on as a newbie recruiter within the legal, working with lawyers for asset management firms. After about 6 weeks, I decided to build a bit of a business case to set up an ESG desk from scratch, mainly because I was extremely passionate about sustainability and thought, I love communicating with people. I know I've got a career starting within recruitment now, and I thought, this could be a great thing to start. There are obviously some other recruitment agencies doing ESG. It was very niche 3 years ago still, and I thought I sort of built the business case to do it, I guess, myself. So I knew quite early on in my career that I wanted to do something within sustainability. So I sort of had to learn everything on the spot there, everything about the ESG, the investment space, as well as becoming a recruiter. So it was obviously, it was a lot to learn. And back then, 3 years ago, it was still growing. With firms, I would be losing pitches because they would be going to the key competitor within this space because of probably the recruitment angle. I didn't really have those skills. But I guess over time, 3 years of working solidly within ESG, I really have seen this space go really quite crazy. I did a search this morning, 6,000 jobs for ESG worldwide within financial services and investment management space. And it's huge. And with that, some organizations that we speak to say that you don't need to have the ESG expertise, so to speak, but you need to have your own personal reasons and your own sort of story as to I guess, why you want to go into this space. I'll obviously speak about that in just a moment of, why it is so important to have that. But again, with that, they are obviously looking for people that have got the right behavioural skill sets and that are going to, slot into their team and bring skills and expertise in different areas that now want to, have an ESG career. So as an example of, firms that are sort of looking at that, I spoke to a global head last year, just as a bit of a catch up, and they'd had an ESG role that they put out, and they'd said, equity analyst sort of background, 3 to 4 years of experience within the investment space, relatively junior sort of position, doesn't need to have ESG experience, but has to have a bit of a personal statement. Why would they want to move into this space? not just because it's, you know, busy and it's a great thing to do, but, you know, why? And within 2 days, they had 1,300 applications. You know, they have to obviously sieve through all of those and see who are going to be the right people. But how do you do that if you've got 1,300 applications? You know, that would take you days. You know, even looking through CVs, it's quite crazy. So there are opportunities to move into this space. And I guess the key thing is what I'm going to be saying throughout this whole sort of webinar is that how do you differentiate yourself to other people that are wanting to move, you know, within this space? It's so important to know what you're, you know, what you actually want to do. You don't want to just get into the ESG space because it's really busy. You know, what do you actually enjoy doing? You know, where within a day-to-day role as well, you know, what skill sets you have, and you know, how you want to transfer your career within this space, which is a really big thing that everyone should be thinking about, you know, all the time. Do you actually enjoy your job? Is there things that you don't like doing? What are the things that you like doing? And then, you know, how is that going to transfer into a job that would be having an ESG focus? So it's just really, really important to always have that narrative, because if you do secure an interview for a job which is saying, you know, you've got the right sort of skill sets of what we're looking for, and yes, you know, you have to be passionate about ESG, and we will consider people that don't have the ESG experience, then, you know, great. But once you're in that interview, you've only got first stage sort of impressions of how you actually show them that you're interested. You know, is it that you are really focused on the environmental side of things and you're upset about all the biodiversity loss? Or is it because you're, you know, after the last year or so, you've seen CEOs being paid millions and millions as bonuses where they've got really awful errors in their supply chain? You know, what are the things about ESG that you want to get involved in from that angle? And it's not just jumping on it because everyone else is jumping on it and there's so many opportunities and there's so many jobs out there, it's a hot market, you know, instantly it's going to be a no from the recruiter, you know, within the organization. So, I mean, generally speaking, what we do and what I do at Fellow Associates is obviously finding the people that have got that ESG experience, but we do sometimes still work on roles which are looking for that 100% behavioral fit of what they're looking for and the transferable skills. And then they can sell their ESG sort of narrative, and what they're passionate about is how they're going to secure an ESG career. Like I said, there's 6,000 jobs that I've seen this morning worldwide. There's most likely not 6,000 of those people which are going to be exact fit for these roles. You know, so I guess it's just extremely important to always understand you know, what you're passionate about and why, and how you're going to use your current experience to, you know, move into a role and actually have it as fulfilling as your career as well, which is really important. You know, don't just sort of jump at an ESG job because it's ESG. You know, is it actually going to be fulfilling for you in a role and a career? Because, you know, you deserve to have a fulfilling career within the career, you know, the space of what you want, of course. But I do see some people that just say to me, you know, I've touched on ESG and I want to go into an ESG role doing pretty much anything. Like, I don't mind, I just want to be in this space. But, you know, that doesn't make sense. You know, what do you actually like? What don't you like doing in a role? You know, if you're doing analysis at the moment and you actually don't really want it, you want to do more, you know, communicating or stakeholder engagement or something like that, you know, but you jump at an ESG analysis role because it's ESG, but then you're not happy. So it's just really important to always reflect, always take the time to know what you're good at and what you like, and then you're passionate about ESG, what does that look like, and then how you can sort of move into a role. So yeah, that's a bit of an introduction to what the what the world of ESG is looking like at this particular time.
Thank you very much, Lati. For example, I have a question. What do you see? What profiles are companies seeking at the moment? Yeah,
sure. So there have been quite a few trends over the last couple of years as ESG teams are really expanding. You know, the foundations are obviously going to have those specialists that are there. You know, they could be within this space for 10 years or so, or, you know, at least a few years under the belt of, you know, the engagement, the integration, the research, all of those different sort of attributes of ESG within a team and an investment manager, that they make sense. But as a lot of firms are obviously massively expanding, different skill sets are required. ESG experience, yes, great, but a lot of firms are being quite open to what the profiles look like. So we've seen, as a bit of a trend, is that you're probably aware of, ratings agencies getting a bit of a bad stick in the market at the moment for, ESG ratings, how reliable they are. A lot of investment managers are deciding to build their own internal tools and basically look at it from an internal sort of standpoint. So the people that they're looking for, data scientists, people that can work with big data, quantitative people that can then help to, visualize these models internally. Some organizations are even putting it out as an extended service, that they're making their own ESG rating, which again is quite niche, but it's completely, sort of changing the way the ESG data is used and harbored. So then that's one sort of area, so, the data sort of side of things. We're also seeing, regulations that are coming into play. There's that compliance angle, the SFDR, people with expertise around that, and actually the compliance sort of angle of that, the legal side of things, and being obviously making sure that firms are not greenwashing, or at least adhering to the regulations that are going to be put in place. There obviously are some, and it's likely that there will be more and more that come into play as time goes on. I mean, just in this example, DWS, they what's happened with them in the market recently. Maybe suggest about looking up about it, but they are currently they've got the SEC on their backs, investigating them for greenwashing. So, it's getting real. People, I think a lot of organizations, they put out that they're doing ESG, it's ingrained into everything that they do, and everything, which is obviously, it is what it is. But there obviously are regulations which are coming into play that have been for some time. So people that are understanding that and then communicate it to the rest of the teams internally, that's another trend, I guess. So there's also, project managers. There's obviously a lot going on within the ESG space, and there's products are changing. They're either going to be changed to be ESG, or new funds are setting up. There's obviously a lot of push from a firm's clients to do this and have more offerings. So they need people that can sort of focus on the products and marketing them effectively, but not at a pushing a marketing professionals and saying this is what we're doing ESG, but more so actually being very well versed on ESG and sustainable finance and everything that the client is offering, and having that product specialist sort of side. And then within that as well as the project managers, people coming from operations that can actually work with all the different teams on everything ESG, if it is looking at the regulations, if it is looking at the research or the engagement, the stewardship, and it's needing someone that can actually come and lead on these projects and help them be effective, and everyone is working well together and collaborative, and it's not a separate entity anymore. ESG should be very ingrained in an organization. It shouldn't be seen as this separate sort of team anymore, of just environmental specialists or whatever. So it's getting people to help the team with the communication to everyone else, and keeping everyone working collaboratively, even if it's an organization with thousands and thousands of employees. It's really important that everyone knows what's going on, because a firm's strategy as well is that a global firm could have people doing ESG as part of their current role, and it's making sure that everyone knows what they're doing. So people are getting obviously like senior project managers in to pull everything together. The strategy is full steam ahead, but they need to make sure that they're on top of it at all times. I guess other trends is like, sort of net zero. That's a big trend within, the asset owner sort of space. So again, that's more, I guess, sort of specialist, sustainability people that could make a move outside of maybe financial services, if they're coming from consulting or something, going into the investment space. So there are obviously quite a few different trends of what's going on, but it does mean that because this area is so busy, they do need the certain skill sets and behavioral aspects to, for the person to make the right role. And when the ESG, obviously, if you're doing ESG sort of, I don't know, specialist sort of research, or you're being a specialist for ESG, it's completely different. But if it's a role where you can go in and learn about ESG, on the job, and you've got that passion, then it makes sense for someone, to sit alongside people and be trained. People do this internally. People do move into an ESG role internally, and it, sometimes can get quite bad stick. But it does make sense if they're not going to be a specialist on, advising on ESG topics, and they're more just, working internally about how they improve, sort of data or whatever it is, then it makes sense. And I guess that's global trends as well. The UK historically, or Europe has been quite well versed within the ESG space for some time. The US is a little bit maybe behind in terms of actually having dedicated ESG teams. So we're seeing a big boom there of first ever hires, being cropped up, and they're building out teams, and they're going pretty full steam ahead in the US. It's yeah, I'm doing a lot of my work in the US at the moment because of it.
Great, good, thank you. And for example, continue with this story, what do you recommend? For example, if there is someone with not a specific experience in ESG, what can they do? How can they make a transition? Because, for example, here we have Wolfram. He's mentioned it that would you like to open the microphone, Wolfram, and explain yourself about this transition that you are looking for?
I'm surprised. Well, thank you, Wendy. I feel very connected to the RI and sustainable investment space, and I see it as a natural progression to the field I've been working in for more than 2 decades. So for me, it's the struggle is more that there are so many educated and bright, dynamic young people joining, and being in the midfield of my career, I find it more difficult to be able to sort of change hats. Although I feel naturally connected to how the field is developing. So yeah, I often don't see all too much direct connection with what you read in vacancies or open positions. And but maybe that's not typical for most of our fellow impact members joining. So that's just my personal perspective.
Okay. Yeah, I guess I've got something I could sort of suggest, is that I mean, there is obviously a lot of noise about this space. There is a lot going on. I guess what I could suggest is, if you are sort of mid level, I mean, what do you really enjoy doing, on a day-to-day of your actual role? We work with ESG sort of impact only funds as well, that still say you don't have to have ESG experience, but you have to be, if they're looking for mid-senior professionals, it's bringing all of those skills that they've had before, and have still got that personal sort of statement. I mean, there are obviously things that you can do, like the CFA ESG, that's always like a desirable qualification to have. There are short courses on the SDGs and things like that. I guess what I always suggest to anyone at any part of their career as well, is to really sort of focus on maybe 20, 30 organizations which you think would be really interesting to you. There are obviously a lot of organizations which are, they all look quite similar, but when it actually comes down to it, they're all very different, not just because of their culture. of what they're doing in the ESG space, and that can be quite difficult to see from face value. So what we suggest as well is networking. I mean, I'm obviously a recruiter, I speak to people all over the world all the time, and people are generally very open to having conversations with people looking to get into this space. You know, there's conferences that you can go to, webinars, and it's about finding the right sort of, I guess, opportunity from like the company that you would want to work with and the people that you would want to work with, and then, you know, figuring out what an actual ideal opportunity is going to look like for you in terms of really like your dream job. And you can break it down into being, what would you want to do, you know, day to day, your role, you know, what are you really sort of passionate about, you know, do you like being a communicator? Do you like engaging with, you know, internal or external stakeholders? Or are you more, you know, analysis, or, you know, those different sort of skills, you know, what do you actually like doing? And then the company, you know, what company do you want to work for? Would you want to go to someone that's a startup and looking for people that have got quite a bit of experience? Don't necessarily have to come from an ESG or sort of, you know, background, but really wants to, you know, go into this space and can bring more of a traditional, you know, I guess, asset management or, you know, financial services of background, whatever it may be, into that. Or do you want to work at, you know, larger investment firms which are really ramping up their ESG offerings? And again, they don't necessarily need to have the ESG expertise, but what you would, I guess, need to do is just to network and speak to lots of these different people, attend conferences, go to webinars, get conversations with people that are, you know, going, and just really sort of figure out what a dream company is going to be. And you find this out by speaking to people and learning more about what people do within this space. You know, you could think, oh, my dream job would be, you know, be an engagement. I really want to, you know, that's something I've always really wanted to do. So try and speak to people that are in engagement and see what they do day to day, because you might think that's what you'd want to do, and then you start speaking to these people and you think, oh, actually, maybe not. No, that's actually, yeah, they've actually suggested maybe I go more down this route, which I didn't realize was actually, you know, a potential sort of opportunity. So just sort of figuring out what avenue you really want to sort of go down in terms of like the entire opportunity. I always tell people, I mean, I did a poll a couple of weeks ago about how often do you reflect on your career. Majority of people said every few months. Had some people say, you know, every couple of months, maybe a couple of times a year, you know, quite minimal. And then a handful of people said only when it's pay review. And obviously this depends on your, you know, your own behavioural. You know, do you want to just do your job and get on with it? Great, good for you. Or do you want to always be chasing the next best thing, or, you know, keeping your ear to the ground because this space is moving so much? I always just suggest to people just to reflect on what makes you happy and what is going to be fulfilling to you within your career, but what are you passionate about within the ESG space? Is it everything? Is it making the world a better place? Or are you, like I said, fed up with, you know, biodiversity loss, or the fact that CEOs are getting paid millions when they've got supply issues with, you know, slave labor? Finding out what you're passionate about, and really sort of reflecting on that, and reflecting on what an exact role looks like for you at any level. So when you do secure those interviews and those conversations, it's a match from their side and then your side, and that's how you get an opportunity going, I guess. You know, that's how they see, you know, this person has got the great skill sets of what they're looking for, seems like a great fit for us. You know, it's just, you know, good all round, and they can do more training for you on you know, whatever it is around ESG which you perhaps don't know or want to have more training for. You know, as long as you're finding a company which fits the opportunity that you want. Yeah, that's the key thing, I think, is to always reflect and always figure out your ideal career path.
Thank you very much for your helpful advice, Lottie. I really appreciate it. It also confirms the way I developed my venture. So we're both on the same page, and thank you for your insights.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Wolfram, and thank you, of course, Lottie. In that sense, I would like to ask you what is important for a candidate to know or to do before even applying for a job?
Yeah, so good question. So figuring out if the company is somewhere that they actually want to work. I mean, yes, there are a lot of organizations which are really ramping up their ESG offerings, some more holistically than others. And it can be quite hard to know this unless you are literally getting insights internally. So again, that's an issue, I guess, of when you're looking within the ESG space. But there is so much information that you can be finding out online. You can see which ESG professionals of these organizations are going to roundtables or are going to conferences and are writing white papers that are, you know, published here, there, everywhere, or, you know, is the firm signed up to the UNPRI? What's their rating with that? And really sort of dissecting the company before you, I guess, think about applying there. So like I said, always making like a list of companies, organizations that you would be interested in working at based on this, you know, the information that you are finding out yourself. Again, before you sort of apply to a role, I know it's difficult. Like I said, there's about 1,300 people that had applied to that ESG role that didn't need ESG experience. So yeah, it's difficult to obviously say only apply to the ones which look really interesting, because, you know, there still might be people that are applying just because they want to get into the space. But again, that's just important because, you know, that was just quite a crazy happening of having all of those applications. It's not always maybe that amount. But I guess, yeah, like figuring out really what you want to do and what you're passionate within the ESG space and what the company is putting sort of emphasis on. So I guess it's really it's just important to always know what you're interested in, what you're passionate about, because that's what's going to be fulfilling within your career. You know, you want to have a role which is in the ESG space, like, you know, great, it's doable, but why, and how, and, you know, all of those different questions that come with an actual like fulfilling transition within your career. I guess one really easy thing to do as well is like on your CV, you know, like I said, I mean, there's lots of different courses that you can do. The CFA ESG is obviously a bit of an expensive one, but is seen as a desirable thing to have, you know, within the investment management space specifically. So there obviously are courses and things that you could be putting on your CV, a bit of a personal statement sometimes. You know, if you don't have ESG experience and you know that, you need to be transparent about it. You know, don't lie and say, you know, I've got ESG experience, and they bring you to interview and then you say, you know, explain you don't. I mean, I've actually had candidates that have just put buzzwords of ESG on their profile, or sorry, on their CV, and then I've had conversations with them and they've told me the complete opposite. And that's so damaging, to just be completely transparent and say, you know, I don't have the experience of ESG. However, I've, you know, if it's real estate or whatever, you know, you've done like the qualifications around the ESG ones, looking at that, you know, you've done SASB, yeah, like the CFA ESG, you know, whatever they are. There's even the SDG Academy that have free courses that you can do. So if you're obviously doing research in your own time, there are short courses that you can do, which are just going to be furthering your knowledge, so that if you do get brought into interview, there is often a question which can throw candidates of saying, yeah, you know, what are you most passionate about within the sustainability space? And people go, oh gosh, you know, ESG, it's really booming, and it's you know, sustainable finance, and you know, we should be putting ESG at the forefront of every investment decision we make. And you know, you know, why are you passionate about sustainability? You need to tell your own sort of personal story within that. And like I said, you know, is it biodiversity loss, or is it the CEO thing, or, you know, it's just really making sure that you're very well versed on why this would be a career that you want, and at the end of the day deserve. I do still speak to some people that are wanting to get into ESG for the sake of it, because they think, oh, any ESG job comes my way, please send it to me. No, because it doesn't work like that. You need to tell me what you're really wanting to do within your career, within an actual role, and then we'll align it up that way. So yeah, that's, I guess, a bit about that.
Yeah, thank you very much, Noti. Yeah, definitely. It's more about we need to know before applying for a job what are our expectations, and also to understand perfectly our skills. And I remember that we were talking about, for example, how can you highlight this interest? So of course, taking any other course, or reading papers, but also sharing information on your personal profile on LinkedIn, it could make a difference. So you have more tools during an interview, and also to be considered for an interview. And there is an interesting question from Tatiana regarding diversity of the employees as an HR professional. How do you work regarding creating a more diverse and inclusive teams in the ESG landscape?
Exactly. So this is actually a big issue, diversity within generally financial services. And when we were actually working on a number of initiatives to actually improve this. It's something called backcasting, of helping the future talent sort of get into this space. But again, it is a really big problem, and that's diversity at all I guess all angles or areas of diversity, ethnicity, gender. It's really is a big problem. And how we are sort of working with our clients on that is encouraging cognitive diversity and different backgrounds of people. So, not just coming from traditional investment management sort of background, so to speak, but looking at that 100% behavioral skill sets. And if it is, obviously, we mainly do work on ESG hires, but it could be, corporate sustainability. It's those different elements which can then come in and really sort of change the way that a team is thinking, and helping them have more diverse thinking. So it's lots of different ways of how we can make our clients' teams more diverse. It is a really big issue, and I think a lot of organizations that we do work with say we need a short list of diverse candidates. And of course, this is at the forefront of everything that we do anyway. But it is a really, really big issue, because the talent is so small. That's why they are looking to get people in that don't have necessarily the ESG experience, but they have to be that 100% behavioral and cultural fit for their organization. And if that is the case, then the skill sets can be it can be 70, 60, 50% or whatever it is, but they have to be the right fit for their organization. So firms are looking outside the traditional ways of getting ESG professionals in. So there's lots of different initiatives going on. There's BWAM's, Black Women in Asset Management, there's diversity projects. There are lots of different initiatives that are working with HR teams internally to improve this for themselves with the recruitment that they do. We're also working with those two as well. But then it is really about changing what an ESG team sort of looks like, because you do need people that are not just coming from top tier universities and have had those opportunities to get there to then now have the ESG sort of a career. It has been that way for some time. I think we're aware of diversity within the financial services sector is a bit shocking. So teams are, like I said, are becoming quite more sort of open-minded about where people are coming from, that their backgrounds within financial services. And if you're coming from, like I said, the right behavioral skill sets, they're going to see this as an amazing opportunity in your dream job. That's what's important. So it's being able to fit within an organization and having your passion and your narrative for ESG, that's where we can make the conversations happen. And you can do that yourself. You can do your own networking with these professionals to have conversations. There's so many ESG people out there that would be more than happy to explain how they got into this space if they are seen as diverse professionals themselves, or whatever. ESG professionals all around the world are usually very open to having conversations and giving advice on how they made maybe strange career paths or whatever. They worked in a legal background and now they're doing something completely different within something, then they did something different and now they're like heading up a team of ESG, and you look on their LinkedIn and you think, that looks strange, how did they do that? And sometimes it is because of who not in a bad way, but it's getting these conversations going and networking, and the opportunities sort of come up I guess that way. And again, it's just as long as you have a really clear narrative as to why you want to get into ESG and why it's important to you and what you want to change or what you want to be involved in. Those are the things which are going to help you get the conversations sort of going, I guess, when it does come down to the interview stage.
Thank you. Yes, I would like to add, why not invest 20 minutes per day for networking? Have a look into other people working in ESG. What are they doing? What are they posting? Where are they working? And eventually, if there is an event, probably you can use that space for networking or make comments on their LinkedIn profiles. I think that's something that opens opportunity to have a conversation. And eventually, you never know, probably you can start a more long-term connection with this person, and eventually probably could jump a job opportunity. So I would like to share with you something that Jacqueline Hart is sharing with us. She is a mid-level career professional. Jacqueline, would you like to open your microphone and explain us about this space that you created? I really like it. What are you doing with this 4-day work week?
Certainly. Can you hear me and see me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah,
we can hear you.
I was, it's one of those things, at a certain point in your career, if you are working in a generalist ESG role that's evolved from an internal shift, such as I was at Johnson & Johnson Medical Devices, you get to a point where you want to perhaps do more dedicated work or find a specialization. And to the point of Lottie, finding which of the many sustainable development goals resonates most with you and being able to decide, okay, I've got the top of the T and now I want to get the length of the T. There is a great process you can follow, which is by sitting with each of the various goals and considering which one means the most to you. And that can really help you to narrow down to, okay, I want to focus on these specific areas, because I found I had so many interests and such a broad palette of skills. It was challenging speaking to recruiters about what it was that I was going to be doing. And oddly enough, after reflecting on the sustainable development goals, I came to responsible consumption. And I realized that that was the piece that resonated the most with me. And then of course, healthcare, because I come from a healthcare background. And that process helped me in my discussions. But I also realized at some point, networking properly, it takes a lot of time and also a lot of mental energy and bandwidth. And when you're working full time, it can be really challenging to do that. So traditionally people have thought, okay, well, what I need to do is quit my day job and find a new job or take a sabbatical. And financially, that's not always practical for a lot of people. So for me, the decision was, okay, to move to being an independent consultant for a period, which would let me work fewer days a week, but would allow me then the space to explore the network and take some time to make the decision before doing something like investing a lot of money in a course like the Cambridge course is fantastic, but I mean, it's incredibly expensive. Not all of us have £27,000 sitting in our back pocket. So, you know, it also allows you time to reflect on what is really necessary to make the move. And I have personally found, I know it's not appropriate for everybody, that working as an independent consultant is a great way to get an experience of businesses. In my case, I work with startups, to see if it's a place that you would really want to stay. Because as you know, it's not exactly at the first interview that people are telling you all the warts and all stories of the company that you would potentially be joining. So it's a nice way to fly around like a bumblebee and pick up on what makes sense for you. But yeah, as generalists, it can sometimes be challenging for us to find the right space, because there's so many things we're interested in. And if you've got 18 years of work experience, you've also got so many things that you've done, which can make it challenging to settle on the thing that's going to bring you the most personal satisfaction.
Thank you very much, Jacqueline. Is there, I think there was another question from Andrea. Andrea, would you like to open the microphone and ask your question about the...
Sure. Yeah, I had two questions, and one of them was to Lottie, around the extent to which you ever see, or how often you're seeing ESG professionals actually feeling a bit disappointed by the work, because, you know, there are still the cases where you will get pressure to greenwash. So I'm curious the extent to which you are seeing that, if you are seeing that, and what you think we could or should do about it. Thanks.
Yeah, great question. I do see this quite often when I speak to ESG professionals. So this is another quite interesting take on it, is that, you know, not all ESG professionals are actually happy because they're in the ESG world based on the role that they're doing, or the organization that they work for, which is actually quite, I guess, quite tragic. If, you know, yeah, you know, if you're working for a firm and then they get accused of greenwashing, that's your, you know, that's their career. That's the, ultimately can be seen as the work that they've been doing. So how do they then move into another organization if they've got their company is tainted by greenwashing? So it's a very delicate area when, you know, I guess I speak to candidates, and if a lot of them do say, you know, day to day of the job, I do really enjoy it. However, the team is going through a lot of expansion. My career growth is starting to get a bit stunted because they are maybe expanding the team. I mean, I spoke to someone a couple of weeks ago who'd said, I was really happy earlier this year, but now I want to move because I've been given loads of managerial experience, and my day-to-day of the research and the engagement, they were having a bit of a blend of the two, is now getting taken away from me because we're expanding the team. They need someone to be managing people. And, you know, they said, I don't want to do that. I want to, but my role is getting more and more of that. By the time that I leave, maybe next year or a year after, I'm more of a manager than I am of, you know, actually being a researcher and engaged with the things that I actually love doing. So, you know, they've obviously got quite a good profile that they could probably make a jump into another organization quite relatively simply. However, when they then make that move, they have to be so careful about what the opportunity looks like and what the company is doing and what their career growth is. Maybe not more so than other people, but because they've obviously gone through what it's like to be in an ESG team, going through a lot of growth. A lot of organizations are doing this exactly the same time. They need to be very careful about what their next step looks like, and it has to be, you know, completely right. So I guess what we do as a search firm is that when we're speaking to our clients, we do really dig into what career development looks like, and obviously, like, you know, the day-to-day of the role, because when we're presenting this to our candidates, we need to make sure that it's actually going to be fulfilling with them for a career, you know, not just because it is an ESG role, and really making sure that it's lining up and it's going to be a great opportunity for them. You know, you do get people that have been within this space for, you know, quite some time, but even as they're going throughout their career, you know, they're maybe becoming more of a specialist when they want to still be a bit more of a generalist or whatever it is, because of the nature of their organization sort of pushing them in that route, because they need to branch the team off into certain areas because there's just so much work that they need to push people into a specialist area. And some people were absolutely fine about that. You know, it is what it is, and they love to have the chance to be a specialist, and they couldn't think of anything worse than doing, you know, all in singing, all dancing, everything, you know, ESG, you know, whatever. But yeah, it is happening, and firms that are doing sort of greenwashing as well. I do hear, you know, awful stories with candidates coming to me and just saying, you know what, I'm sick of being here. You know, I've done great work and I just get given tasks and that's what I need to do. And there's no scope for me to be innovative or making, you know, even making any sort of change. And they obviously are ready to make that move ASAP. I guess, you know, maybe it's sort of internally sort of greenwashing, and to the externally, it's not very apparent. It's obviously there's all those different things that happen there, but it is an issue, unfortunately. So again, this is what I keep saying, is to always make sure that you're really up to date with what a company is doing as much as possible if you can, but knowing what you want to do in your career, and what's going to be fulfilling, because even people that are in ESG roles, you know, don't assume that every single one of them is completely happy, you know, within this. So yeah, it's definitely an interesting market, even if you are a specialist, for sure.
Thank you. Thanks, Andrea. You have a second question, right?
Yeah, it was pretty well tied in there. So, you know, the question previously was also around the extent to which you see ESG being integrated, and for what reason. But I think that also can be sort of a trigger for whether these professionals are happy in their career, because if it's ESG simply for the sake of achieving greater financial results, that can be a bit disheartening, actually, versus for the sake of actually managing impact. But I think you sort of summed it up with the last question. But actually, I have another one, and I'm curious to see how you're viewing the needs of these hiring managers evolving, because, you know, sometimes you need the detail-oriented, all hands on deck type of content work. But you also, I see, especially more and more as this gets strategically embedded into the wider strategy of the organization, you need a little bit bigger picture as well. And to the extent you see those needs being balanced in one particular role, are they happening at different levels over the organization, so on and so forth?
Yeah, really good question, actually. I guess generally speaking, each firm is actually quite different. I know that sounds a bit sort of generic answer, but I mean, some organizations you could assume that they are really on the ball. You know, they've had ESG offering for, you know, a very long time, and they, you know, they're great. They've got it down to a T, and they're, you know, successful and everything. But then they could be looking at actually really pushing the strategic side of things now, which, you know, externally you could think that doesn't. We always thought that they, you know, they had it going really well. But I mean, we're actually working with a firm who's got a really good legacy within this space at the moment, but then they are putting a lot of, you know, strategy sort of angle on their recruitment now. So it's quite unique within that. And then you obviously look at some of the bigger organizations which have got really quite firm, you know, ESG strategy, and they've had that very, I guess, defined for a number of years now. But now we're actually really ramping up their team with all these expertise, and, you know, as an example of getting in data scientist people to build a rating, and, you know, going it from that angle. You know, it doesn't necessarily matter where an organization is within their ESG I guess growth or whatever, but it is obviously so important that they are doing this growth holistically from all angles, you know, the outside world, the investments that are making, the people actually working within these teams. It's a pretty big picture to be, I guess, to the outside world. But yeah, like internally as well, it's interesting to navigate for sure.
Thanks, Lottie. Well, I think to summarize a little bit what we have learned during this session, I would say that the winning qualities that I see is like, of course, we need to do some homework regarding having a look and create this list of the 20 companies that you mentioned. I think it could be the first step. And also be optimistic about that. Okay, if you already have a business experience, how can you complement and highlight your interest to work in ESG? Lottie already mentioned that you can join different webinars. There are a couple of them that are free of charge. Probably afterwards, if you can share more details about them, we can share it with our attendees. Sure. And also, I think flexibility, it's extremely important. And once you have, you jump into this interview, it's very good for you to have clarity of what are you looking for. And if you understand, at least if you understand what is this about ESG, because it's not only about having a good feeling or want to contribute in a positive way. You need to be prepared and highlight this information to the recruiter during the interview. And lastly, but I would say probably the most important, if you are passionate about it, just mention it, work on it. What can you do? There is this example from Jacqueline that she is dedicating one day to explore the different opportunities. And it's important to complement all this work with getting to know other people. Networking, it's key elements. And personally, I would like to add on that, try it and learn from each experience. Eventually, you will land that job that you feel happy and you are contributed for a positive impact, not only in your life, but possibly to the planet. So I think, is there something else that you would like to add, Lottie?
No, summed it up very well. That's the only thing I would say is really just reflect about what it is about the ESG space that you want. Why do you want to get into this space? Really, why? What's your narrative? What's your story? What are you good at within your job? What do you want to do more of? Where do you see your role sort of going? Networking, speaking to people that are actually within this industry that do potentially the job that you've been interested in wanting to do, if that's engagement with companies that they invest in on ESG issues, finding out what they do day to day, and you'll then find out what job you actually want to do within this space by the networking, and then you can target those jobs and get the conversations going. And if you're very well versed on the ESG space, like Jacqueline said, going through the SDGs, figuring out which ones are most important to you and how you want to then translate that into your career within this space. Like I said, it's very rare that we work on roles that don't require ESG experience, being an ESG specialist search firm, but sometimes these do come up. And the main issues that they have and why they would come to us is saying, if you've got ESG candidates, great. If you don't, then we need to have people that are very well versed and show why they want to get into this space. And then that's how things sort of move forward, is that we would put candidates forward that are doing this well, and they progress through the interviews and potentially even get offered. So the roles are out there. It's just really important to just to know exactly what you want to do and what's going to be fulfilling for your career as well, because you don't want to sort of get into the ESG space just for the sake of it and then actually hate what you're doing day to day.
Thank you. This session is recording and it will be available on our YouTube channel. So I'm just sharing the link with you right now. Well, Lottie, I just want to thank you very much for sharing all your knowledge and expertise. So very interesting insights, and there is so much that we can still do after this conversation. Thank you very much for taking the time, and to all people who join us. Yes, have a lovely weekend, everyone. And remember, you can become a member of Net Impact Amsterdam. I'm just sharing the link with all of you. So see you next time. Take care.
Thank you for having me, and thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, Lottie. Bye.